right, everyone, buckle up because we are diving deep into a word that's way more interesting than it might seem at first glance.
Oh, I can already tell this is going to be good. I love it when a seemingly simple word has hidden depths.
Right. Like surprise. We've all used it. We all know what it means. But I'd be willing to bet almost everyone listening have at least once, maybe in a rush, maybe late at night.
Don't forget those phone keyboards, tiny buttons, big fingers. Recipe for disaster.
Exactly. Suddenly it's surprise, just like that.
Yeah.
Poof, the second R has vanished. So for today's deep dive, let's unravel why this happens. We've got some fascinating linguistic stuff to unpack here. What's the deal with the surprise anyway?
Well, to kick things off, surprise can be both a noun and a verb, meaning you can have a surprise party or you can surprise someone with a party.
And yet, no matter which way you use it, that pesky spelling trip-up pops up.
It really does. And you know, a big part of why we stumble over those two R's actually boils down to how we say surprise. Think about it. We tend to emphasize the SR and the prize, that second R. It's almost whispering.
Like a sneaky little ninja R trying to slip past unnoticed.
Yeah.
And I guess if we're not really emphasizing it when we speak, it makes sense that it might get overlooked in our writing, too.
Exactly. Our brains love efficiency. They're all about conserving effort wherever possible. And one way they do that is by simplifying things like pronunciation. Over time, if that second R gets less and less love in spoken language, our brains might just decide, hey, why bother with two? One'll do the job.
So it's like our brains are playing that game where you whisper a phrase down the line, and by the end, it's morphed into something totally different.
Laughs. That's a great analogy. It's like a linguistic game of telephone going on inside our heads over generations. And this whole process actually has a name: haplology. It's this tendency for repeated sounds in a word to get condensed into one, especially when they're tucked away in an unstressed syllable.
Haplology. That's a mouthful. So our brains are basically taking a shortcut, ditching that second R for convenience.
Precisely. And because this simplification often starts with how we speak the word, it's no wonder the misspellings sneak into our writing.
This is reminding me of when I was a kid, and my brother tried to convince me February was the correct spelling, because who needs that first R, right? It wasn't until much later I realized it was February all along.
I love that. And see, your brother was onto something, just not quite the right something. It's that same principle at play, though. Our pronunciation influencing our spelling.
It's amazing how these little quirks of language can reveal so much about how our brains process information.
Absolutely. And don't even get me started on Wednesday, losing its first D.
Don't worry, we'll have you back for a deep dive on Wednesday another time. But okay, so we know why surprise trips us up. Any tips on how not to fall into that trap, aside from, just slowing down and really thinking about those double RS?
Well, our source did offer a pretty clever mnemonic. Surprise contains rise, because when something is surprising, it makes our emotions rise up. It's a fun way to link the spelling to the meaning.
That is pretty catchy. I might actually remember that one. But I think what's really fascinating here is how surprise is just one example of a much broader phenomenon.
I couldn't agree more. This whole surprise situation really underscores how much our brains rely on those stressed syllables to anchor the spelling of a word. The less emphasis a sound gets, the more vulnerable it becomes to these kinds of slip-ups.
So it's not just about memorizing a bunch of spelling rules. It's about understanding the deeper mechanics at work.
Precisely. And I'd even argue that this awareness is about more than just avoiding typos. It's about cultivating a sense of empathy for ourselves and others when those spelling blunders inevitably happen. We've all been there, right?
Absolutely. It's that whole to err is human thing. But in this case, it's our amazing, efficient brains that are often behind those errors.
Exactly. So next time you see that red squiggly line under surprise, remember, it's not a sign of failure. It's just your brain being its wonderfully efficient self.
Love it. So to wrap things up, any final words of wisdom for our listeners before we sign off?
Here's something to ponder. What other common misspellings might stem from the same kind of pronunciation-based simplification? Think about words where you tend to slur sounds together or drop syllables altogether. There's a whole linguistic treasure trove out there just waiting to be explored.
Ooh, that is a great question to leave everyone with. Our brains, everyone, are truly fascinating things. Until next time, happy word nerding.